why I call this like an on-purpose relationship, the client-therapist relationship, because I always say, what happens out there is going to happen with us. And it's one thing, we're going to talk about problems here. Yes, that's why you're here. But it's a whole different thing when certain problems come alive between us. That can be some of the hardest, but also some of the most therapeutic moments.
Welcome to Deconstructing Therapy, transforming therapy and the therapists who lead it. Let's deep dive into conversations, reshaping therapy into a powerful tool for healing, liberation, and systemic change. Join us as we challenge the status quo, reimagine care, and celebrate therapists breaking barriers. Let's transform therapy together. I am so thrilled to have Natasha Sandy with us today, all the way from Toronto, Canada. Natasha is a therapist, advocate, storyteller, and champion of underdogs. A deeply curious and creative person, Natasha brings a unique blend of playfulness and seriousness to her work. Grounded in her identity as a queer, gender nonconforming individual with Russian and Jewish roots, Natasha has woven her personal journey of healing into a practice centered on radical love and liberation. Hi, Natasha. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah. I mean, you've actually been one of my own personal inspirations this last year. I've done a lot of my own, like decolonizing and evolving my practice, and just your work and all your work on social media has like really shifted my mindset or put words to stuff that I've been thinking of. So it is a big honor to have you here today and kind of get to pick your brain in person. So that's exciting for
Oh, I'm
me.
so glad. Thanks so much. Yeah, that's definitely that's a space in the on Instagram where I just kind of think and feel things out. So I'm definitely it's very much my own process of pondering out and sharing out loud.
Oh, that's wonderful. How's that been for you? How long have you been on Instagram that way?
Maybe 5-ish years. I'm going into 7 years of practicing therapy, and I started this, yeah, Instagram about after the first year or so, and it's been big evolution for me where I started with just sharing quotes of people, things that resonate for me, and then bringing myself in bit by bit, more and more, and then now a lot more, and who knows where it's going to go from there. So yeah.
So, can you tell me about that a little bit? I was actually curious about that. When I see you or see other kind of therapists just so authentically themselves, I just admire it so much because I'm always thinking I'm still a little bit hesitant. I'm putting myself out there a little bit more and more, but there's this image we have of what therapy is supposed to be, this sanitized kind of image of it, and to start speaking out and being more authentic and challenging some things can be a little scary. How was that whole process for you? How did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a constant challenge. How did I
Mhm.
get there? I'm not even sure. I feel like I just kind of just did it a bit more and more, and it just kind of grew. As far as social media piece. But honestly, that's interesting you say that because I don't feel like when I, see other mental health practitioners sharing about themselves, like I see a lot of vulnerability and I feel like I actually would like to be more vulnerable and bring my personal self a little bit more, but that's hard because the internet is not a place for that, I feel.
What's the fear?
Well, I guess it is and it isn't because people are doing it and it's beautiful and it's resonating for people and there's conversations, important conversations being had as a result. But on the flip side, how things go down, how things get twisted, the violence of things like cancel culture. It's so easy to be misunderstood and things, there's so much nuance that you cannot capture on there. So I don't know. And it's also like, I guess, because of how I think in a very kind of zoomed out cultural, you know, decolonist big picture perspective, that's just kind of my natural go-to is why my how I frame things in my I guess on social media, the stuff I put out. But I want to it's very much a balance, I think, especially when it comes to healing. We got to there's a zooming in and see how these things actually affect your life, and that's kind of what I do with clients as well. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, that balance. At least with social media, I could probably do a bit more bringing myself in, but I'm trying to guess work that out how I wanna do that. Because I certainly wanna talk about my own struggles,
Yeah.
including family of origin stuff, but that's
Right.
hard because it's sensitive
Mm.
and my family isn't very much on board with that, and
Mm.
so, it's tricky. It's a tricky thing.
It is a tricky thing, but I appreciate the dilemma that you're speaking to. And it's
Yeah,
interesting because when I'm reading your stuff, I'm like, oh, wow, this gives me a little bit more permission to be authentic. I can put myself out there a little more. Haven't fully gotten there yet, but
yeah,
it at least gives me an image. But the just hearing your own perspective of you, of yeah, I'm putting my ideas out there and I'm talking about challenging systems, but there's this vulnerable part of me that still feels guarded, but
yeah,
I hear that yearning for it to start coming out a little bit more. Like you see the value in it. You're seeing the value in doing that in your therapeutic work, and
yeah,
then how to navigate that out loud. Because
yeah,
yeah, Instagram's a little snapshots here and there. How you can't really capture the nuance of what you're trying to do. But then you
yeah,
also don't want to be so guarded because you're fearful of what people are going to think or what people are going to say either. And what's the balance?
yeah. Yeah, and there's certainly like no one's going to agree with everything you say. That's absolutely true. And there's certain opinions and viewpoints I have that aren't popular and that people get very upset about. And that's where it goes to certain topics that are very charged and very polarized in society. We're not going to work them out on social media. And so there's certain things that I'll put out once in a while, but the conversations have not gone well, nor would I expect them to. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's so many parts and pieces to it because I was also thinking to the more personal piece with the family, like just to give you an example of the struggle and the challenge. Like, well, like for example, I grew up in a working class family because we're immigrants, and my mom, as many immigrants started with, she had no English, so when she moved here, she was working at daycares and minimum wage jobs. And it was, going to English courses at night. And we lived in one of the poorest areas in the city. Mind you, my stepdad was an engineer, a mining engineer. So financially, but I don't know what was going on financially because we had no money. So
Mm.
we couldn't. So like my friends who were blue collar, their parents owned that. I had friends who family owned homes, but my family didn't. So like I don't know what that
It's
meant, especially
confusing.
as like I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. They're like, what?
When I
Where did it go? Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah, yeah. Um and also my stepdad did end up, losing his job, and then he
Mhm.
had to be, was a pizza delivery driver and a taxi driver at some during that time. But as far as the working class, that actually created conflict between me and my mom because the way she understands conflict or working class, and I guess maybe the Russian or Eastern Euro view is about education. They really value it's a very elitist culture, I think. So you can be dirt poor, but if you're educated,
Mm.
it's a different thing. And so the way that she
Class
views
is more
working,
connected to education than
yes,
finances.
then money, yeah. And
Mm.
so she was actually very upset which I thought was very interesting for me to say that we're working class. We are not. We are educated family. And I was like, well, there's nothing. I mean, we're still an impasse. We have not worked that one out, which is another issue in the family. Is difference and the ability to work through the tensions that come up when there's difference. So, and that's just one tiny little example, let alone stuff I put up about Israel and Palestine, because we're very divided on that. So this stuff is very much. I'm trying to. It's easier in many ways for me to talk about this stuff big picture wise, and working it out very personally in my family is a whole other story, as it is for a lot of folks, I think, who find themselves in liberation movements and social justice circles. And
Yeah, but as you're talking about it, I can hear still that hey, there's this confusion happening of how I grew up and what I was told and what really happened, and you're just like you're still trying to make sense of it, and you're able to keep connecting it back to these bigger systemic issues too.
yeah, Yeah, that's right. A lot of confusions that I'm trying to figure out. And it doesn't help, like, then that's a big part of it is being this disconnection as a, you know, child immigrant. I have 0 memory of my homeland. I speak very, very broken Russian. I can't even communicate with my biological father that I want to reach out to before it's too late. Like, there's just these barriers that, and so this hard to access even information about my own identity, this whole other half of my family and that piece. But then all these pieces that have to do with decolonization is starting with the land, connection to the land, disconnection to your homeland. That's such a big question mark for me.
Is that what makes this everything happening right now when we're talking about colonization and genocide and all? Is that where it hits you more personally because you can touch on that feeling of being disconnected to your land?
I'm just starting to understand that. Just starting to put those pieces together because it has literally been such a disconnect, including up here. Like, half the first half of my life, I was a perfect little colonized person. That the education system did well. I they pumped out a great little colonized
Right,
capitalist person.
right,
And
right.
actually I have a lot of anger about that too. Like, I'm,
Yeah,
47 years old, and I feel like a sucker, you know, going with, you're supposed to go, education is important, job security is important, all these things. And of course, in my home and my mom, of course, the immigrant narrative, she was white knuckling it to survive.
right.
And so that was very much that driver, just like in a lot of immigrant families, you have to do well, and that job security piece.
Can you tell me about this awakening? Because you're saying, "Oh, I was doing it the way I was supposed to. I was that good little colonized girl, and they did a good job." And then, oh wait, I feel had. This is not. How did that awakening happen? Like, can you tell me a little bit about?
Yes. So in my undergrad, there was one, I think, I think there was little things here and there, meeting different people, coming across different literature, music, things like that. But one particular moment stood out when I was doing my undergrad. So I was in my early 20s, and it was a intro to equity studies class way back before equity studies was even something, in the mainstream speak. But anyways, there was this one professor that came to do a guest lecture, Arnold Ituaru, and the way he spoke, the hair on the back of my neck went up. Had chills. He was speaking so passionately. He was using, just very visceral, emotional language to talk about this stuff. It wasn't like this dry, theoretical, academic speak. It was like the bloodthirsty savagery of the imperialist machine and things like that. I was like, wow. I mean, yeah. And so that kind of was a really major moment that
Yeah,
very much of an awakening. And that was kind of a start. Of course, that could have been done outside of academia. But
but
yeah,
that's where it started for you. So, what
yes.
would be the one piece you took from that, from his kind of emotional?
Well, that was actually my first introduction to racism. Um, and then because the one course I actually took of his was called the Racist Capitalist Imperialist Press. Yeah, that was my very, because I had no idea about racism because I was indoctrinated to be racist. And so that was a slow process, and it took about a year for me that I was actually in kind of steeped in white guilt, and just like, because it was such a eye opener for me. And I kind of feel bad for people these days because in social media it's so charged. And even, and
Yeah,
then actually that comes into academia too. I have clients who have major anxiety from seeing things go down in classrooms. I don't think there's really a whole lot of safe spaces in colonist culture, but I guess certainly not in academia, being
mm-mm.
an industry of it. But it did feel safer to not know, to have questions, to get things wrong. I feel back then when I was learning than it is these days for people.
Yeah, that's so valid. Yeah, it was safe to get things wrong and question.
Yeah.
And now,
Yeah.
since ironically the conversation is more mainstream, there's actually less safety in the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. When we so need to be
when we
talking about
so
this
need
stuff.
to. Yeah, in a safe way. Yeah, that's a great topic. I mean, how do we create that? How do we create room for nuance? How do we create room for not getting it right for the rupture? I mean, we know as therapists how important rupture repair is, just normal part of every day, every relationship, every situation. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no can you first make sense of, how do you make sense of the fact that there's less room for it right now in society, and how what can we do to create more space for it?
I'm trying to answer the same question for myself. Because, yeah, in order to be effective at it, be good at it, somewhat good at this rupture and repair thing, we have to have a lot of practice in it.
Yes.
And I don't know that in my life, there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunities for it. I look for them. I invite them, like in therapy, because of my position in there. My, as far as the power relationship, I invited, I speak to it, but even still, it's hard for clients to come in and say, "Hey, I didn't like when you did that," or "That pissed me off," or whatever the case. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, the repair or process. But outside of that, my family, they don't wanna really go there, and I can't do it myself, and so that's a very slow going process, and, luckily I have space, lots of opportunities with my partner to do that. Yeah, I feel like, opportunity-wise, that doesn't happen a whole lot, and I even in therapist groups, like, I was, because that's something I really want and seek, and I'm in 2 different therapist groups right now, and the same kind of thing happens. There's either an unwillingness to go there, or people, from what I've so far experienced, I don't have, like, tons of, years of being in therapy groups or anything like that, but just from what I've been doing this last year, people get uncomfortable. Therapists are humans, right? They have their own tolerance levels for discomfort, and
And rupture is going to happen. It is going to happen in every relationship. And
yeah.
the irony of it not being able to happen in therapist groups, and I've experienced situations like that as well. I've also have some wonderful ones where we're able to do that, but
That's where we learn it, right? But
yeah,
do you
that's
feel
where we
like
learn it. We have to model it, especially if we want it with our clients, and then we're couples counselors, so we're teaching it to our couples. But
yes.
we need to model it ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do admit, it does get uncomfortable sometimes with, especially with client stuff. That's been a learning curve for me. Of, wait, I feel like I misattuned with you, or something I missed, or I think I got that completely wrong, and be able to go back and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, what happened? I want to understand this, and I want to really apologize here for getting that wrong."
Yes. Yeah, and that's, like, such a huge thing, just one-on-one or with couples, which, by the way, I don't work I work mostly with individuals, do a little bit of couples work here and there, but it's mostly individual, and I'm moving towards group. But, yeah, it's hard enough in the one-on-one, let alone in a group or in a, like, and that's where I think leadership is so important. I actually took 2 different, trainings. There was this one great place, the Toronto Institute for Group Studies, where I did my first group study or group therapy training, and just before the pandemic, and I liked it so much that I felt like I wanted to do it again because there's so much to it all. There's so much to learn, and that also, that's one of my big beefs with the mental health industry's trainings. It's so heavily didactic,
Yeah,
theory, book learning, all of that, and so little experiential, and I
yeah,
feel like it needs to be, like, at least
all
90%.
experiential.
All of thank yes.
Really, like,
All of that's what
yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think emotionally focused therapy does do better with that than many others. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's the experience you've had or not. But
yeah,
you're right, 100%. Just like you said with your professor, you were like, "Oh, that changed me because it wasn't didactic. I was able to take it in. He brought in the emotion. It touched your heart." And
yes.
what we do is just experiential. I mean, the experiences are what going to change people when our
Yeah.
nervous systems shift, right? I mean, you talk about that a lot on your website as well, of just where these two nervous systems that are just shape shifting towards each other and
Yes.
adjust. That's where the change happens. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen cognitively. Yeah. And we have to model that everywhere else. So if we're trying to do this in session where we know the body's important, and we're trying to have an experiential nervous system shift, and then we're going to a therapist peer group, and then we're getting all cognitive with it, or training, there's
Yeah.
that disconnect. Like, how can
Yes.
we embody that all the time? Same thing with what you're saying with rupture and repair.
And I think that we underestimate how much of a gulf there is. Like, this stuff is easy to say, to put words to understand up here, but the actual practice of it is so different. That's why, like, as a maybe the person learning or healing, it's
Mhm.
one thing to have you need to have that over and over and over again, right?
Yes,
This consistent safety or safe enoughness
yes,
to kind of start shifting and the nervous system and the tolerance for discomfort.
yes.
But as a the facilitator, leader, therapist, whether it's one-on-one or group, that needs to happen too, like a lot, a lot. And that's why I do trainings over again. Like I don't have a bunch, well, I have done a bunch of different workshops and trainings, but all around the same thing. I don't do like all these different modalities because it takes so much, like one thing, even like emotion focused therapy is such a good example. I'm very much drawn to that piece because that was such a missing piece for me growing up foundationally. And plus seeing how the colonist culture is so emotion phobic. It's so uncomfortable, allergic, pathologizing of emotions. And so coming upon this modality felt so right, so revolutionary. And I've done so many trainings in it and over because even though it's simple on the face of it, the
Mhm.
framework, the teaching, the videos, it's all very like it's almost like, duh, of course, how beautiful, how powerful. There's so much to it though, to actually embody it, to absorb it, to you find that too?
To do the reps over and over again, but I just really am taken by just your process. It feels like you have such this authenticity to embody this in every space. When I'm on Instagram, how can I be more real there? How can I be more vulnerable there? When I'm with my clients, when I'm in my peer group, and then even when I'm doing my trainings, it seems like there's such a draw from you to really get your nervous system in check. I want to do as many reps as possible with this. I need this rupture and repair, and I need my body to keep experiencing this. So I do really appreciate that from you, because I think a lot of us can do it in certain scenarios, and then maybe our insecurities creep up or our egos of, oh, we want to be seen this way in the therapist group. But the way you're describing how you move through everything, that it just seems like this genuineness of like, I want to just really feel this change, and this I want to take in being able to say, hey, I got this wrong, how can I do it differently?
It's because it's such a different thing to experience, to get to like, I wanna just absorb as much as I can now that, like, I know what it feels like to I mean, it's exciting, it's addicting, in a almost to learn new ways, like, I guess this is a liberation process, I want more liberation, it's not enough, and but also it's slow, it's so
It's
slow.
slow. I think that's why you're able to take it in, because you're able to take in the slowness. That makes sense to me, because that's what I'm asking myself. I'm like, oh wow, how is she able to do that? I want to do that, and then I get caught up. Oh, I have to prove myself, or I have to the insecurities creep. You know, when you're in different scenarios of, oh, how many letters are behind my name? How many letters are behind this other person?
Oh,
Right?
that mental
That
colonization,
mental
right?
colonization. Exactly.
It
Exactly.
gets in the way.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
speeds you up and it pulls you out of your nervous system, pulls you out of what you really need. We just need to be at home in our center, in our own wise selves, and we need the reps to do it. We don't need more and more and more cognitive overload to do it.
We're overloaded on the cognitive part of things. Of course, actually, why wouldn't it be the go-to? Because that's the most emotionally lazy way. Colonist culture wants overnight, right? Like that doesn't want to go into the work, the messy, the emotional, the process of it. So, I mean, of course, the certain CBT cognitive stuff, I guess, is for sure helpful and maybe a first step, and even catching how we think and understanding there's different ways to think. But, of course, the deeper stuff it's connected to, that's the meat. That's the heart of things.
And I love just it's going to help me question of, am I carrying this out in different spaces, because it can be such a disconnect of, we're slowing down, we're in session, we're doing this with our couples or our individuals, and then wait, are we doing it between us and our client? Are we able to get to that level? And then wait, are we able to do it with our colleagues? Are we able to do it in our other scenarios? Like, are we really taking that humility, that slowness everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge for me in my sessions to slow down because I feel the power of that when I've been in the client chair and the therapist is very slow. That just does something so powerful to my nervous system, and it's new. because back to family of origin, that is not how we operate there. And there's so much possibility that exists in when we slow down. And so it's definitely a challenge because it's easy for me. I used to talk really fast and sometimes still catch myself doing that. But even just slowing down, but especially in the emotional pieces in session, I got to check myself constantly and bring it back and bring it back. And intellectualizing too, that's a go-to. That's an easy go-to for me and for others. And that, I mean, there's serves a purpose to some ways, but it's also a great way to avoid what really needs to be talked about.
Until you said this, it didn't click for me that the inability to slow down. I know that's a block for me, or the intellectualization. It does connect to that mental colonization because it is so bred in us to keep speeding up, keep that grind culture, keep going, keep going. So
Yes.
I guess a slowing down, even though logically we know the growth happens that way.
That's the thing, right? It's so frustrating sometimes to get it up here, but the doing and practicing is a whole other thing. It's a challenge. I guess that's the work of it.
So how did you make that shift? Because you're saying in family of origin, it wasn't there, right? You had that kind of grind culture of go fast and keep pushing yourself. You grew up in that. Is that what you
Go
said?
fast, out externally, internally, what's going on? What's your problem? Just tell me. Let's get to the solution. Like all of that. So what was it? Sorry, you're asking how did I
Yeah.
come
How
to
did you
this?
make this shift to the way that you
I
have?
guess experiencing it. Just like so many other things in life, we don't know something different until we see it, experience it, have it modeled. And so, mind you, in my more colonized, mentally colonized state back in the day, more judgmental, all the things. I was all the things. So I would, if people were to talk slowly, I would roll my eyes. I would be frustrated. I'd be, come on, get on with it already.
Right.
And so the more that I kind of, with of course therapy and the coming back to myself and undoing all that shit, which again took a long time, that's where I started to, my relationship to people being slower changed. And I was able to appreciate that and really connect with it. Because I guess that's the thing. It was a closed offness to that before. Because that's part of the from. Like, I don't got time for this.
Yes. We got to keep going. We got to keep. Yes. And so when you were able to slow down yourself, you actually were able to slow down with other people as well. And
Yeah.
I started attracting that different energy too. I kind of want to revisit something you were talking about earlier with the rupture and repair because I think that's so important.
Yes. Yes. I'd love to
And I
talk
would
about that.
love to talk about how do we do that with our clients better? How do we invite that with our clients? And another conversation I've had around this topic is if we're able to do that with our clients and in society in general, we don't have to start relying on these authoritative figures either, right? It's when we are not able to do that that we're like, oh, let me go call, let me grab the police now. Let me go grab the licensing board. Because it really starts with not being able to have that relational rupture and
Yes.
repair in a healthy way. So if societally we're able to do that,
Yes.
we
And
can
you know
come
what?
to a place. Yeah,
I feel like when we go to that place, when we're calling the cops, getting litigious, canceling all of that stuff, we've already lost. Like it's gone.
exactly.
Because it's
Exactly.
only gonna make that shit makes things so much
You're
worse.
more and more and more disconnected.
Only
100%.
it's exceptions. Exceptions exist where that works.
But when we're in a society where that's the go to, it is just such a relational failure, right? We're getting
Yes.
further and further away from connection when we're going to repair it with this authoritative figure.
It's an unfolding practice because I didn't learn it in my training, didn't learn it at home. So I try to insert myself in on purpose spaces like therapy groups to actually experience it myself so I can then understand it, name it, speak to it. But one way I do it, I'll say in my consults with people, like, listen, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when I'm going to let you down, get something wrong, offend you, hurt your feelings. And those can be really therapeutic moments, some of the most therapeutic and transformative moments if you can let me know when that happens. And then I also put it in my intake form. So I try to, I guess, just name it there, but it's still hard. And I know for sure that a lot of my clients haven't told me and don't tell me. Ones that have, I really appreciate it. And there's been some wonderful repair moments. There's been ones that didn't work because I'm not going to know. right? That's kind of the point of ruptures. Like these things happen accidentally unless you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, it is tricky. Another person I was interviewing a few days ago, we were talking about how it could be harder with white clinicians too because of that power dynamic. So if you have a person of color, they might be even less apt to tell you. And culturally, we have that of, oh, no, no, don't challenge authority, or don't, that internalized racism too of like, so yeah, I'm sure there's layers and layers of it. But
Race,
I do like that you put it
age.
out there from the beginning. And even your website, you've kind of done a beautiful job of really painting this picture of we're just collaborators in this. You invite that in. I love that it's not if, it's when. This is going to happen. So let's figure out a plan for what to do. It's just part of relationships.
And then sometimes also at the end of sessions, I'll say, was there something you didn't like either about what we talked about or how we talked about it? So there's that piece. I also think there's a lot of learning and mistakes, tons of learning and mistakes. And so, like in one rupture that I had with a client that I was trying to repair that didn't work, I had brought it up. There was a frustration that I brought it up to want to talk about it because they thought it was done and over with, but I didn't think so. And that was fine, but there just wasn't space to talk about it because it triggered other things. And there's one current situation I'm in with a client that we've been actually for a few months now been kind of navigating tension because this was a rupture that happened. We've been working together for quite some time, and this is actually the first time this happened. Which part of me, I was like, "Hey, I'm glad this is very important. This actually, I'm surprised it hasn't happened before." And there's kind of, I feel like there's a reckoning. We're at a crossroads. Like, what are we going to do? And it hasn't been decided yet because this is very new for this person to navigate this stuff. Because usually it means rupture means abandonment. It means heartbreak. And so we neither of us know how it's going to go, and it might not work out. I hope it does, but we'll see because there
Even
might.
if it doesn't, you're still giving them an experience that they haven't had before. Of
Yeah.
just even being in that so much longer than they ever have. And even if it comes to an ending of a relationship, but to be able to do that peacefully with some kind of, like, all of that is new. There's so much richness in rupture and repair. I mean, I've had so many better relationships with certain clients after we've had a rupture
Yeah, that
because you
makes
can teach
sense.
them like, oh wait, this person's going to be there for me even if
Yes,
I'm
it,
ups- I
it
can I it's a
deepens.
safe person that I can be upset
Yes.
with. Some of them have never had that in their family of origin where they can get mad. They've never had people apologize to them before. Like that is a new experience for a lot of people. So there's so much richness in that if we're able to do it. One way I come about it is talking about what did rupture look like or conflict look like in your family of
Yes.
origin. Did
Yes.
people not talk to you? Did you feel like you had to go away if you thought you were going to disappoint people? That might come up between me and you.
Exactly. It, yeah.
Yeah. And it's probably going to come out in the same way. If you feel like I'm disappointed or I got something wrong and your go to historically was to get quiet or to get resentful later, like let's see what if it starts coming up with us, we can do it differently. Let me
Yeah.
know.
Yes. That's why I love, that's why I call this like an on purpose relationship, the client therapist relationship, because I always say what
I like
happens
that.
out there is going to happen
It's
with us.
going to happen.
And
It's
it's one
going to
thing, we're going
happen.
to talk about problems here. Yes, that's why you're here. But it's a whole different thing when certain problems come alive between us. That
Yes.
can be some of the hardest, but also some of the most
Yes.
therapeutic moments. And it requires competence on the therapist part too. And that's part of what I struggle with is the, I guess, good enoughness because I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm far from where I'd like feel really confident, fairly confident. Like I guess it's okay. It's still kind of shaky. It works more flowy or easily with some clients and others because everyone's different. The issues are different. What it brings up for me is different.
And everybody's not a good fit, and that's okay. But I love your capacity for repair. I love even just this conversation we're having. I think it's so important. I think there's so many times where there's a conflict or there's an opportunity for that, and a client instead leaves. You're just doing that trauma repetition with your therapist. And if you can have that awareness ahead of time, that this could be such a wonderful opportunity for you to experience it different than you did growing up.
And also it might be imperfect. It probably will be for sure be imperfect because I'm not perfect and I struggle with this stuff too. But at least it'll be different than what you're used to.
Yes.
Interestingly, the one one situation I was talking about with the one client where we're still figuring it out, are we going to be able
Mhm.
to work this out? It actually has to do with a political polarized issue in society that's where the personal comes into the political in this very intimate way, because there's all these pieces to it, and at the core in this particular case has to do with difference of opinion. For you to disagree with me, like say you're my therapist, I'm your client, even though you disagree with me, I can still experience you accepting me and my choices and guiding me and supporting me along the way. So that's the piece versus we have difference, you're right, I'm wrong, or vice versa. That means you're this and that and you're unsafe. It's a very different thing.
Can we disagree and still respect each other? And that's what society needs right now more than anything.
Well, right. And the thing is though, sometimes and that's where like these impasses and reckonings come in, and that's where violence happens, because when the difference is too big, when your difference of opinion imposes on my humanity, on my life, then it's not okay. And like that's the colonist way, right? The colonist way doesn't take no, doesn't understand no. It pushes, it imposes, pushes and continues and tramples the boundaries. And so then that's where you have no choice at sometimes at some point but which is what to push back, which is what we see in Israel and Palestine, what we
Right,
see here on Turtle Island between
right.
indigenous people and colonial presence
Mm-hmm.
and govern or oppression and all
Mm-hmm.
and the violence that comes with it, and in so many other parts of the world there's no agree to disagree and there's no respect of that difference because it's fundamentally incompatible.
We don't want to go to the other extent where everything is such a disconnect that we can't respect each other. And so, how do you know something is a big enough disagreement that this needs to be a hard boundary and I need to disconnect from this individual versus no, there's room for love and respect and disagreement?
It depends who you are, what the relationship is, what the effects are of the disagreement. Just thinking about like when in family, a lot of times so many people just kind of back off or don't go there because it means losing the love, losing the connection, which is I mean, certainly as children, that's life threatening, right? And that's where we develop those strategies in the first place. But even as adults, that's very powerful. I have clients who will sacrifice their truth, their boundaries, because their relationships are everything, and that's understandable. They don't want to lose that relationship, as hurtful as it is. But
So the cost matters individually for everybody. I think that's what I hear you saying. Like you can't just look at how big is the conflict. You have to look at everything else around it. What is the cost of you having this? What is the cost of like say me having this conflict with my mom when it might pull me away from a community or a society that is a bigger cost for me versus maybe for you having the exact same disagreement with somebody else, you're not getting pulled away from a community or situation. So you gotta have to there's a lot of nuance.
like say for example truth and reconciliation, right? I don't know if in the States that's a known thing, but here in Canada they've called it this thing called truth and reconciliation has been the government put out there, but there's really nothing to reconcile. These are conversations I have with Shay about it because there was no this relationship in for the first place. Like it was a, a relationship of abuse and power overing and having to fight for your life against these invaders. That's a different thing, and that's where you need community and unity to fight these or resist these life destroying forces, people, ways. Whereas if it's in your own family and if you're on your own in it, that's a really hard thing. You need your family. Like there's such a power in unity and community and tribalness. And that's like one of the most heartbreaking things about mental colonization is this disconnect and this hostility or this the confusions and that it creates in your closest relationships.
Boundaries are complicated. I think
Mhm.
this is another
Mm.
piece where I get frustrated in Western culture. They make boundaries seem so easy, and I think even with us immigrant families, it's a lot more complicated than
It
that.
is so
A lot more
complicated.
complicated. But
It's
there
just
is no hanging out in the gray. There is
yeah.
no let's reorganize this relationship so it's
Yes.
healthier.
Yes.
There's either it you can either have a fully healthy relationship and have these wonderful vulnerable conversations and repair, or cut them off.
Right.
And it doesn't and again taking the piece of being immigrant families, different culture, there the cost is so much higher for these boundaries. We lose
Yes.
connection to ourselves, and that's the colonization piece, right? This is something I
Yeah.
talked about in another conversation was Because if you're going to a white therapist, Western therapist, and they're teaching you to start having these stricter boundaries with your family and your culture, and that's what healing looks like, you're getting colonized.
Yeah. Yes. And that's not healing, that's
That's the
avoidance.
healing.
Yes, and that's why I feel so strongly about family therapy, group therapy,
Mm.
because individually, of course, we need there's a lot of that can come from that a lot of us need, no doubt about it. But there are missing parts that we will never access in individual or even couples therapy because it's in the family of origin. And it's so powerful because it's the source, it's the root. I mean, even though, I mean, who knows where it goes when you unravel the intergenerational stuff.
But look at the power of healing that you can get when you come to the root of it.
And I wish more families did this.
Yeah, and then it goes to the other generations, and you're breaking
Yes.
generational trauma and the cycles. Like, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it is so powerful. So I know we talked about a lot of different things here today. They all are connected though in various ways. But what are some takeaways we can point to?
Mhm. I think slowness. Don't underestimate the power of slow and the need for slow. Nothing happens. Even if you think about just things you do, right? Planning your day, planning your week. How often do things take longer than you think they will? And so the same applies times a thousand when it comes to this kind of very sensitive work. And also, we're talking about a whole lifetime of learning certain ways and then undoing and unlearning. So yeah, I think slowness, the power of slow.
100%. And so, and what I'm taking away in a different way from you is people say that we say that in trainings all the time, be slow in session. And I need to keep carrying that out into the world. I can't have this capitalistic mindset of just keep going and grinding and then feel like that slowness is just going to happen in my therapy room. Can I hold on to that in different ways? So you've really shifted my head a little bit with that
Oh,
one.
yeah,
I
I
appreciate
love that. And I love too also the rupture and repair. I'm glad that you brought that in because that is huge. That is a passion and obsession of mine.
that. Mm.
That whole thing. So I'm still we should have a whole conversation about
Yes,
that.
we can.
And many. There will be many of those too,
Yeah,
because
that could be a whole
there's
other
so
two
much learning. I don't know way more than I do know about it.
hours.
So yeah, just
Yeah, but I think if any therapists are watching, just how are you doing that rupture and repair with the clients? How are you inviting that in? How are you creating an atmosphere before therapy even begins to make it safe to do that? And can you really acknowledge the value and the richness of how we can grow our clients when that happens?
yes.
Sometimes it's not that there's just a bad fit or this person needs to go somewhere else. It's we can do this differently than you've ever done it
Yes.
before.
To the end, to that point though, there was one post I came across that I loved so much that I actually share with clients, new and old, when the opportunity arises. I'll share it with you if you want to share it with this or whatever it is. I can. I don't know if it's too long to read, but it's basically a realistic promises from a therapist, and it's from an attachment perspective because we all have attachment wounds,
Yeah.
or maybe not, or at least let's say 99% of us, let's say. And it's such a beautiful way that she names realistic promises.
Okay, here it is. I'm going to read this, and I want to make sure I give this therapist credit. It's Billy Dunleavy at the Relational Therapist on Instagram. Be sure to check it out. Realistic promises I might make to clients with deep relational wounds slash insecure attachments. If you have found relationships disappointing, I will almost definitely disappoint you at some time, probably repeatedly, if we work together long term. If you have trust issues, I anticipate your trust in me will wax and wane and we will have to repair and rebuild many times over. If you have been raised with emotional neglect and a lack of attunement, I will 100% not get it right each time. I will misjudge, might even overstep, and will frustrate you at times unwittingly. If you push people away in relationships, you will push me away. If you are used to enmeshment and porous boundaries, you may struggle to feel a closeness within the therapeutic frame and be angered by my lack of openness and instruction. If you are raised with harsh, unfair criticism, you may hear criticism in my words that isn't always there. We will need to work through these moments. If you have anger and rage towards authoritarians, I may invoke that in our work despite its collaborative process. We will need to be cognizant of what else might be going on. I promise to recognize, name, and not deny perceived power imbalances. I promise to own my mistakes and missteps as best I can. I promise that safe relationships can survive ruptures when adequately repaired with changed behavior. I promise that some ruptures may feel too hard to come back from. I promise that personal responsibility can, with time and work, bring you more relational ease. That's beautiful. I really love that. Thank you so much for sharing. This is exactly everything we've been talking about. We are human, and there's value in us actually being human and messing up. There's actually more value in us actually messing up with you than us being this perfect therapist.
That is exactly it. That is it, and actually, I think for if clients can lean into that instead of because we're not a don't it dehumanizes us to put us on a pedestal. We are
Yes.
not.
Yes.
Yes, we do have a power imbalance, and we should work with it, name it, speak with it, and there's gonna be tensions in the relationship that comes from it, but do not look at us as the all-knowers and gods and all this stuff. That's dangerous, and it's giving your power away. Work with the imperfection because we can handle it. This is what you're paying us for.
Yes. And it will help you in relationships. The messiness is where the growth is. It's not from us giving you all this wonderful knowledge, right?
I love that. The messiness is where the growth is.
Well, this was a
Right?
wonderful I feel like I could talk to you for like 3 more
I
hours.
know. We gotta do this.
We
I'd
gotta
love
do
to
it
do it
again.
again.
We
Me
gotta do
too.
it.
I love this stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
so
it was
much.
fun. So do you want to kind of give a shout out to where people can find you? Any other things that you want to draw attention to?
I can find me on Instagram at rehumanizing ourselves. That's pretty much it for my online. That's enough. That takes enough of my time. Working on other things, but they're in the works and going slow.
Wonderful, wonderful page. So please
Thank you
check it
so
out.
much.
I'll put it in the show notes. And it's great talking to you. I hope we will get to have many more of these.
Awesome. Me too. Likewise. Thanks so much, Alefyah.
Join the movement and keep the conversation going at deconstructingtherapy.com. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Deconstructing Therapy. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you are able to and would like to help sustain the podcast, you can find us at buymeacoffee.com/deconstructingtherapy to show your support. Thank you for listening.